What was it like trying to battle against this idea that somehow these older folks know what's best for the younger generation?
Well, the irony is, for a long time when we started the organization, we were not challenging incumbents. We were just focused on state legislative races that many people weren't paying attention to. But we know there is so much power across the country in these state legislatures, especially as we're seeing all the redistricting happening now. Republicans have known this for the past 50 and 60 years. That's why our country has really gotten to this point, I would say, more than anything. It started happening long before Donald Trump. But it was only when we started saying that we're going to challenge members that we feel like are failing to meet the moment in safe Democratic seats, not even purple seats that could ever flip to become Republican, but only safe Democratic seats, that people are like, oh my God, that's not okay. And then we saw that what happened to be at the DNC, where they were so focused on their incumbent protection racket and protection of these broken status quo that brought our country to this point, they ousted me under a gender balance rule and technicality to redo the election, instead of acknowledging maybe we should bring in some fresh blood. Maybe we should try to do things differently. But instead, they decided, no, you know what the real problem is? It's David Hogg. Let's just get rid of him. And that's just, I think right now we're seeing over and over and over again the importance of us bringing in new, fresh blood. But I understand why there are so many people that just fall in line in the system, because there's so many incentives to just stay there, right? And there's so much of an incentive not to change things the way that they are overall, because it's individually beneficial to the people that are currently in power. But the reality is, I know the consequences of what happens when we don't address a broken status quo in favor of our own selfishness, because it's what happens. It's the very reason why people know who I am or the work that I do. It's because it's what's caused so many of the problems in our country, whether it's gun violence, climate change, or other things, to continue, where people are like, you know what? I really care about this one thing. I'm going to sacrifice my values on all these other things, and let's just not talk about that. And it's the same reason why Democrats continue to take corporate money, because they say, well, the Republicans are going to take it, so we got to take it too. And it's crazy to me that they don't see how that, if we as a party just said collectively, you know what, we are not going to take any corporate sponsors, we're not going to take any support from corporations, we are only going to rely on support of the people, and we could run an ad against every single Republican and use that as the major political liability it is, because the American people on the left and right are sick and tired of the system that has been bought and sold for them. I don't understand how they can't see that as the benefit that it could be. I have these conversations every day with many people in the establishment who are like, well, you just don't understand. Republicans are taking this money. I'm like, well, guess what? You wouldn't need as much money to win elections if people actually believed that you were standing up for them.
Yeah, that's why I didn't need to read today's autopsy report. I knew when they kicked you out of the DNC, David, that the autopsy report should read this: the DNC died by suicide. They did it to themselves. And so, it literally, and I understand that this gets thrown around quite often, but in the most consequential election cycle of probably the history of this country, we have a DNC, the final party left to defend democracy, that is not even on life support. They've got nothing left. And I work with candidates as well, all across the country. All of them are grassroots candidates, first-time candidates. And they tell me that they get no direction from the national DNC, no direction from local DNC. There's just no input whatsoever. Not to mention the literally dozens upon dozens of places that I've visited who have been completely abandoned by the National Democratic Party, places like West Virginia, that has a strong blue base, and places where at this particular moment they feel like, the Republican Party has lied to them and abandoned them, and rather than using that moment and taking advantage of it, we just get more of the same, if anything at all. I don't even know what the hell Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer and those people even talk about in their meetings. What the fuck?
Probably how to find their next pen so they can write their next letter, because they've ran out of ink.
They have a whole drawer of strongly worded letter pens, perhaps. We had Santiago Mayer on, and what he said was also confirmed by the report, which is that there's not this year-long ground game occupation community building on college campuses in communities, whereas they have Turning Point and they have all of their conferences, and that is seems to be such a huge miss. We spent so much money on ads and digital warfare, but not a lot on the ground. How can that change going forward?
Well, I think the question we need to address in our party is, do we want to continue debating how expensive the lipstick is that we buy for the pig that is the party, or do we want to address the pig? Right? Like, that's really what we're talking about here, right? And we need a party that we need a product that people actually believe in the first place, because that is the easiest thing. The market is something that people actually believe in, can properly represent them, and not the very special interests that they feel like they've been screwed over their entire lives. And I'll be honest with you, what scares me the most is that our party's message of saying over and over again, vote for us because democracy is so important, that, everything's going to be fine. Donald Trump is the real problem. And if you vote for us, everything's going to get better. People do not buy that shit anymore.
Not at all.
Their lives are not getting better. We've lived through multiple times where Democrats have had trifectas, where Republicans have had trifectas. And sure, things have generally been better, or at least not as bad when Democrats have trifectas, obviously, because they're, not appointing justices to the Supreme Court that are going to eviscerate voting rights, eviscerate abortion rights, eviscerate all these other things. But we're not addressing the fundamental underlying economic anxiety that is driving so much of the crisis in our country right now, where people, the social contract that people have been sold in America, especially young people, if you go to school and you get a good job, that you can have a family, you can have a house. If you like, it's not free. You got to work your ass off, but it's at least achievable. They don't believe that anymore. They don't see that reality at all.
They don't believe
it's not true.
Exactly. Because and us going out there and spending another $1 billion on saying, no, it definitely is true, things are getting better, when they aren't. People know that. They're not idiots. I think there's a tendency of these consultants to think like, well, so many people around the country are so dumb, like I can just spend whatever I want on them and I can manipulate them and we'll be fine. But it's just ridiculous that we're in this position, because the very reason we cannot address those underlying economic anxieties is frankly because our entire political system has been bought out by corporations that have bought out the left and the right, so that we are constantly focused on culture war issues and other things, instead of actually acknowledging the fact that the working class is a lot more in common and is against a lot of the establishment of both of these political parties. That is largely discredited now because our underlying economic reality has not been addressed. The cost of housing has skyrocketed. People can't pay their rents. They're working 2 or 3 jobs, and they're being told by their government, everything's fine, don't worry about it, because the GDP is going up because we're building so many data centers right now. Just be happy about that.
Well, and I think people are starting to figure it out, right? Like, everyone's clowning Jeff Bezos and his involvement with the Met Gala. Like, the celebrity culture is starting to die off, or at least I'd like to believe that it is. And people are starting to get the fact that it's billionaires against everyone else. And so this would be a great chance to harness that. And I myself have asked for like activations, whether it be at gas pumps or at grocery stores, to be able to listen to and engage with people and say, hey, we're going to answer to the people, not to corporations. And this is something that it just solidly feels like we should all be able to get behind across ages. I mean, my daughter is screaming against corporations because she's now in college and having to see like, oh, wow, this is a lot more expensive when I go to get my shampoo than it was 2 months ago. And so young people are feeling it, older people are feeling it. So it seems like it should be easy to build a coalition. So why are we not able to?
Because the donors and the corporations that fund both of these political parties are against it. And that's why Leaders We Deserve exists. We rely on 250,000 individual donors around the country to fund our work, and it makes it harder, right? In some senses, in that, when we went out there and supported Zoran, there were a number of major donors that we had that said, because you supported this guy and I don't agree with him, we're not going to give you money anymore. And had we not had the vast majority of our funding come from people that give less than $1,000, it would have been a lot harder to have that conversation, because there's people that work who we have a mission, but ultimately, because there are so many people that give us $5 or $10, we have what so many people do not have in DC, the independence to do what is necessary, even if the donor class, even if the corporations do not like it. Because here's the interesting thing is, A lot of those people that called me after we spent $300,000 supporting Zoran were the same people that have told me for years, David, how do we get back young voters? How do we get back young voters? We need young voters. We need young voters. And then you get somebody like Zoran who got 3 times the 18 to 24-year-old turnout of Kamala Harris. And then it's like, no, not like that, not like that. Here's the deal. If you're saying that about a candidate that got 3 times the voter turnout of 18 to 24-year-olds, you're not actually interested in getting the youth vote. You're interested in getting sick of, in brainwashing young people into believing everything is fine and we don't actually need to change anything. We don't need to tax the wealthy more. We don't need to address the fact that housing costs an astronomical amount and young people cannot afford to go to college. And even if they do, their jobs are being automated away. What you're telling me is like you're invested more in keeping the status quo the same than actually winning. And that's the crossroads that Democrats are at. Do we want to actually build a party that goes against the special interests that have fucked up our country so much and actually win and win back our country and defeat Republicans and crush people that, for example, allocated, Jesus Christ, Michael, $1.7 billion to fucking insurrectionists? Because if we're going to do that, we need a very solid anti-corruption message that shows that we're bringing a new generation into government that are not younger versions of the same old people that are there right now that are actually going to make the problem a hell of a lot worse when they're corrupted, but truly a new generation and a new future for the Democratic Party where we fight for the little guys and we aren't just talking constantly, well, we're not Donald Trump. We're not Donald Trump. Give me $5 right now or democracy ends tomorrow because we're not Donald Trump. People are sick and tired of that. And guess what? Donald Trump, he's not young either. He's not going to live forever. There will be a day that comes after him. The question is, what the hell are Democrats actually going to run on then? Because the past 10 years, we've been running on what we are not instead of who we are. And it's time for that to change.